The first version of this essay was more of a secondary source analysis than a project. I got to about 3,000 words before realizing that I was heading down the wrong path and had to rethink the whole thing. What I arrived at, I think, is better but still deficient in many ways. The first way it is deficient is the lack of engagement apart from the background reading I have done to make sure my primary source analysis makes sense with secondary reading. This is due to the word count in my decision to analyze each case on its own. I admit I tried to find a way to incorporate both secondary and primary source analysis, but the secondary sources always seemed tacked on, as if they didn't belong there, and were only there to fulfill criteria. It was hard to include secondary sources in that way, as they were always inevitably neglected. Instead, I had to settle for Barbara Demick's approach in Nothing to Envy, which I had read recently prior to writing the essay. The secondary sources inform the analysis but are not explicitly a part of it. This is a severe shortcoming on my part, and my inability to adequately include both is either an odd quirk in my character — I could have left them in the tacked-on state and ignored them — or an effort by me to make the analyses as clean as possible. I cannot pretend to know which one it is. All I know is I decided to write it up the way I have, because I felt more confident with it like that, for reasons I'm not entirely sure of. As for my performance over the course of the module, it has been less than adequate. This is due to some personal issues that I will not go into here and my bad time management. I left the research way too late, and when I finally came to it I realized that I had massively overestimated how much 5,000 words could convey. My original plan had been to write an essay about sexism in the 18th century legal system using cases spanning 40 years, but when I came to do this it became clear to me that this was unrealistic. I then read a few cases, and wrote up the secondary source essay which I have already mentioned, before realizing that was missing the point, and then I reread the 12 cases I had looked at and decided to refine them down to 6, which would allow me to spend a decent amount of time on them all. That said, I am not sure how useful my analysis on these 6 cases is. Certainly, they do attempt to explain the reasons for the defendant's acquittal, but I think anyone who is not already interested in the legal system would find it hard to get interested in what I have written. I have made an attempt to persuade the reader that these cases are interesting and worth looking at, but word count has restricted this, as analyzing the cases is more important. Though I cannot say that I have overly enjoyed the process of constant revaluation and rewriting that has led to a project that I am still not entirely happy with, I can say that it has been useful. Even if my mark on this project is lower than I would like, the skills I have learned will, I hope, be invaluable in my future work. Before this project I had of course reevaluated and rewritten my work, but never to this extent. It has shifted the parameters in my mind concerning how much work I am willing to delete to attempt to improve it, whereas before I would have thought it unthinkable to delete a 3,000-word essay. Now I know it was necessary and probably the right thing to do. The scope of my project is also, I think, a shortcoming, as it is not specific enough, and instead of researching in detail into a hitherto unresearched area it seeks to illume, in more general terms, the workings of a legal system that has been looked into. I have attempted to counteract this by refining the cases chosen to a specific range at a specific date, and hopefully this will provide the reader with a more intimate and immersive experience, but I cannot be sure that this is the case. This is most likely due to my lack of planning at the initial stage, which stemmed from my lack of attendance. Though I scored a 68 in my proposal, I am sure this is due to my Turning Points essay and not the proposal itself, as the proposal itself was lacking in refinement, and when I consulted it upon starting the project, I had to rework the entire thing to make it coherent. I think the analyses of the cases are good in terms of what I set out to do. I wanted to, as much as possible, give the reader the details of the case, and simultaneously analyze and explain these details. I cannot say that I have done this amazingly well, but I hope that I have at least given the reader a look into the workings of the legal system in these 6 cases, as that was my main aim. I have tried to incorporate quotes as smoothly as possible and interject these with explanatory sentences, to give a seamless reading experience. I hope that the prose is not clunky and the ideas and explanations and descriptions in the reading are clear and easily understood. If they are not, it is due to my inability to keep the reader in mind while writing and assuming that the reader can infer what I mean without me explicitly saying it. It is hard to know if I have done that here. It is much easier to know this in hindsight, but I have been told that I do this before, so it is not improbable. One thing I have learnt above all else, and will be taking to 3rd year, is the vital importance of full attendance. This year I let my attendance slip awfully, and, as a result, I did not have the full effect of the teaching and the invaluable help it would have given me. Whilst some of my absences were due to things out of my control, I cannot say that they all were, and I have to accept most of the blame. I know now that I should not have let personal issues affect my education, and I should have, despite my own problems, gone to everything, and got the support that I needed. I was arrogant in thinking that I could do it on my own. In future work I now know it will be important to consult the tutors, and ask for their help when needed. If I had just overcome whatever it was that was stopping me from doing this, my work would undoubtedly have been much better. My project is hindered by this mistake. Overall, I think my performance during this project has not been great, but equally it has not been awful. I have learnt a lot from the process of refining and rewriting, and these are skills that I will be able to transfer to future work. I have also learnt a lot from my overestimation at the start of the project. In future work I will think longer and more carefully about how realistic my objectives are, instead of assuming that what I have decided to do is achievable, as I did here. The importance of time management and planning has become much clearer to me. If I had managed my time better, and planned with more foresight, the project would have been much more manageable. Instead, I was in a situation where I was proceeding by trial and error more than anything else, which allowed me to get the project completed but made it far less interesting and effective than it would have been had I planned my work better. Planning and time management and proper use of educational resources, it is now clear to me, are more important than I had foolishly thought.